Happy Wednesday. All right, Tara, you've been really busy this week, but I'm sure you've heard about Kamala's new VP pick,
Oh
Tim
yeah.
Waltz. I was so shocked,
Yeah.
especially after our last episode. I'm like, okay, it's not Shapiro. So, like, that whole ad that he created, I guess, was just hopeful thinking. Nope, Minnesota Governor Tim Waltz. And Ben Shapiro posted something, and I was like, this just perfectly describes the whole situation. He says, quote, picking Waltz is a massive gift to the Republicans. He's a radical leftist from a non-swing state with a long history of insane statements who presided over the burning down of his state in 2020. And I mean, my gosh, like when I think of Minnesota, that's the first thing I think of, the BLM riots where the police stations were burned to the ground and this fucker allowed it to happen for like a long time before he finally, did anything about it. So there's this video going around social media and it's Waltz's wife. And it's the most bizarre video because she's saying how she kept her windows open during the BLM riots so that she could smell the burning tires. Like, so bizarre. Listen to this clip.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing. And I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
Tara, like, what a bizarre thing to say. You kept the windows open as long as you could so you could smell the burning tires of your city burning down. Like, what?
Yeah, so you could, fill your home with toxic chemicals from the burning
Yeah.
material. Like,
I know. And so I wanted to play that because it just highlights how weird this guy and apparently his family are. And I mean, their daughter as well, she got caught leaking the National Guard plans to rioters. And he's just as extreme. So I'm going to play another clip that was played on the Morning Wire where Waltz flat out says that he is a progressive socialist. Listen to this.
Shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Just do the damn work.
So one person's socialism is another's neighborliness. Like what? It's so bizarre and it's scary. I mean, it's like these people are so far out there. DC Drano, he posted a video of Waltz signing a bill that allows all illegals in his state to get a driver's license. And as we all know, you pretty much just need a driver's license to vote. So obviously there's a reason behind that. And there's this video going around social media of a Minnesota mom who took her daughter to the DMV to get her driver's license. And as she's pulling up, she's videoing this. There is a line of what looks like hundreds of Somali refugees lining up outside the DMV to go and get their license. And little fun fact is that Minnesota has the most Somali refugees of any state. And so Waltz changed the Minnesota flag to look just like the Somali flag. Like, no joke, I pulled up a video and it's unfreaking real. This guy is so far left leaning. And so you have Kamala and him. It's like two radicals together. I think it spells disaster. And personally, I think it's really going to turn off the swing voters, especially given everything that's going on with the stock market crashing, the inflation, the fact that we're getting into this insane war. There's already wars going on. I think a lot of people moved to the middle and even to the right in the last few years because the left just went too far too fast. And this guy is not going to appeal to them. There's no way. It's like if you want more summer of love riots and these draconian lockdowns, then this is the guy for you. But we all know most Americans don't want that.
yeah, he's actually more left leaning than Kamala, or at least that we know of so far, because frankly, we still don't know what Kamala's actual stance is on anything because she has yet to give a press conference. And this is what, like day 17 where we haven't heard anything. But you're totally correct. Like Tim Waltz basically burned Minnesota to the ground. He was also one of the most extreme governors during COVID. He, was one that put his state on communist lockdown like California. And he even set up a hotline for Minnesota residents so that they could like rat on each other if they saw someone violating the stay-at-home order. And when he was interviewed about it, he said that it was, quote, for their own good, end quote. Like, that's fucking creepy. And he was involved in covering up a $250 million fraud scheme that happened in his state during COVID. And this is, I think to this day, the largest theft of taxpayer money during the pandemic. And even FBI Director Christopher Wray made a comment about it at the time, talking about how insane it was. And like, surprise, surprise, no one was ever fired. Nobody was held accountable. And so I want to point out some fun facts that I read in an article in the Gateway Pundit yesterday, because to be honest, like I really didn't know much about Tim Waltz other than Minnesota being a shit show during, COVID and the riots. But I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of some of the legislation that he recently approved during Minnesota's 2023 legislative session. So there's the PRO Act, the Protect Reproduction Options Act, which allows for abortions at any stage of pregnancy with no restrictions whatsoever. There's the Reproductive Health Care Bill, which makes Minnesota an abortion sanctuary state. There's the Health and Human Services Omnibus Bill, which requires taxpayers to be the ones funding abortions for anyone in the state. There's the Trans Refuge Bill that makes Minnesota a refuge for children seeking gender-affirming care, and similar to California, allows the state to take temporary emergency custody of children away from their parents if their parents won't allow them to get gender-affirming treatment. And this applies not only to kids who live in Minnesota, but also children from other states. And on top of that, it bans enforcement of any subpoenas or extradition of these kids, if their parents try to get them back to their own state. And like, it's insane. Let's talk about their budget. The state budget increased from $52 billion to $72 billion, which is a 40% increase just in the 2023 legislative year. Okay. It includes the largest infrastructure bill in state history, which is going to cause an increase in taxes for state residents to the tune of $8 to $10 billion over the next 4 years. And from the way the budget seems to be structured, 65 million of that is going to go to the Department of Administration to establish equity grants, and 11 million is going to be an increase for the governor's office. Now, there's a free meals program, which to some extent I'm in support of that, but in keeping with the equity theme, this is a program for all students, regardless of household income. They're all going to get free breakfast and free lunch every day. But guess what this is costing the taxpayers? It's an estimated $388 million over the next 2 years. Let's talk DEI education. School districts, including charter schools that aren't in, part of the state school system, they must provide free menstrual products in boys' bathrooms. Schools will now be required to offer an ethnic studies course that must include an anti-racism component, as well as curriculum discussing how race and racism have been, and most importantly, still continue to be, quote, potent societal forces, end quote. Along with that, Minnesota school boards have to have advisory committees to recommend ways to adopt, quote, anti-racist and culturally sustaining curriculum, end quote. And the Department of Education is being required to create an ethnic studies working group where the commissioner will have to seek input from the Minnesota Ethnic Studies Coalition, which is tied to the Defund the Police movement. There's a program called the North Star Promise, which is going to provide free college for students in homes with income below $80,000 if they attend a in-state public college. And again, sounds nice, but this is going to cost the taxpayers $120 million just to get the program going, and then $50 million a year to maintain it. Oh, and by the way, illegal migrants are allowed to take part in this program too. And Minnesota is now also the first state in the country that will be paying teachers unemployment during summer. Now, we can't leave out the government because the government in Minnesota, what they are spending for climate and energy policies increased by over $650 million, including shit that we've already seen fail, like the electric school bus program and electric vehicle mandates. They've allocated $20 million for the creation of a new useless government entity called the Minnesota Climate Finance Authority. There's the Carbon Free by 2040 bill, which is also being called the Blackout Bill, that's going to require 100% of electricity sold by utilities in Minnesota to come from carbon-free sources. Now, keep in mind that currently 50% of the state's electricity is produced from coal and natural gas. And it's very unclear at this point where the other 50% is going to come from. But 80% compliance has to be achieved by 2030 and 90% by 2035. And also by 2035, 55% of electricity generated from non-carbon sources has to come from renewable sources, which doesn't include nuclear power. And again, more for the taxpayers, because this transition is expected to cost households an additional increase of almost $4,000 a year. Now, in order to meet these demands, what has to happen? Agricultural land is going to have to be converted to solar farms. So now we have Minnesota farmers that are already being approached by companies wanting to lease prime farmland to build these solar panels. So what's that going to do? It's going to further diminish crop supplies and in turn increase food prices. Now, Stephanie, these are just a few of the highlights. Like, I literally only mentioned maybe a fifth of what was covered in this article. I didn't even cover their like newly enacted shady election procedures. And we still don't know if there's more like ridiculous shit in this legislation, because the article pointed out that, like, just like what happens in Congress, all of this legislation for the most part was passed in the 11th hour, where they couldn't even read it all. And so basically, like, there were provisions that were deliberately concealed in the bill that haven't come out yet. And like, basically, if you guys want the country to just descend further into the black hole that we're spiraling down in mismanaged debt, massive tax increases, more insane DEI legislation, no energy independence, higher inflation, no border control, and what will ultimately be a quick slide into Marxism, socialism, and eventually communism, where your family and your children's lives will be forever fucked in the name of equity and the global agenda, then vote for Harris Waltz.
Yeah, the whole part about the gender affirming care and how other states, kids can flee and go there, like, that is really scary as a parent. And that is, I mean, I'm just imagining every predator pedophile out there is going to be like a magnet to Minnesota to take advantage of the whole situation. Like, it's just absolutely disgusting. And yeah, neither Harris nor Waltz are Democrats, okay? They are socialists. They are socialists. Like, that is what you're getting. And you want to know what happens when you go to socialism? Well, just go look at Venezuela, okay? That'll open your eyes. I mean, out of all of the potential VP picks, this guy is like the most left that she could have picked. But then, of course, you've got the MSM, and they're trying to say, like, oh, well, he was in the National Guard for 20 years. And so he's going to appeal to all of these like moderate swing state voters. Bullshit. First of all, Minnesota's not a swing state. Second of all, yeah, he was in the National Guard for 20 years, but it turns out the military isn't too happy with this guy, because as soon as he found out that he was going to be deployed to Iraq, he decided to up and retire and abandon his team that he was leading. And he sends them to Iraq and he stays safely in Minnesota. And so a lot of military people are speaking out about how this is just absolutely despicable. And let's not forget, he's going to be going up against J.D. Vance, who served honorably in the Marines and was deployed to Iraq. And I'm going to play a clip from J.D. Vance that was posted by the Daily Mail, where he's calling out exactly that.
When were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Waltz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not. I'd be ashamed if I was him and I lied about my military service.
So that's what everyone's so pissed about, is that he's lying. He's trying to make it sound like he was like in these combat zones when he didn't. He abandoned ship and he abandoned his unit.
Well, get this shit. Like the MSM is trying to sell him as, quote, folksy. Okay. So, like, he's this all American dad from the heartland of the Midwest who served his country proudly. And I was reading this in a Daily Caller article that recently came out, and it talked about how all these MSM outlets are using basically the same script like they always do. So, NPR, Newsweek, and the Wall Street Journal all describe Waltz as having a folksy demeanor. The New York Times called it a folksy persona. Bloomberg and Barron's both use the term folksy appeal, and ABC said that he has folksy mannerisms.
Oh my God. They're such like puppets. It's like they're just
Yes.
given these talking points. It's so ridiculous. And the other thing is he looks fucking older than Biden. Like he's not a young guy. And so for
Yeah.
everyone being so fed up with like the old people, she could have picked someone a little bit younger. I saw their fundraising. So as war's breaking out and there's like important things, you know, they're out at a fundraiser, and he freaking like talked the entire time. He totally like stole the show from Kamala, which I thought was freaking hilarious. But speaking of Kamala, now her husband is getting like all this scrutiny. And the reason is because he's the guy that went on national TV talking about how, you know, toxic masculinity is terrible and it needs to stop and, you know, all this stuff. When it comes out now that he had an affair in his last marriage with his daughter's nanny. Now, I personally could care less about this stuff. I mean, I really don't care about their personal life. But the fact that every single day in my TikTok comments, people are blasting Trump for allegedly having an affair, I think it's hilarious that Kamala's husband has skeletons in the closet. It's like, don't throw stones if you live in a glass house, you know? And it's like, on top of that, you know, it was his daughter's nanny and she allegedly got pregnant. So it's like a pretty big scandal for them to be going around talking about toxic masculinity and how it needs to stop.
Yeah, I agree. Like I do not give a fuck what people do in their personal lives. Like I don't care. But don't get up there and like preach your shit and be a hypocrite about it.
Well, that's just the thing. They're hypocrites about everything. Everything they've accused Trump of doing, they do. I mean, this is the same pattern repeating over and over. And, you know, like I said, no one has seen Kamala or Biden address the American people with regards to this war that's breaking out across the Middle East that is involving the United States. I mean, this is a huge deal. And you know, I went to whitehouse.gov thinking, okay, they'll at least have like a statement, even if they didn't publicly address the people, they'll have a statement. No, it was a freaking joke, Tara. The last update was July 26th, and it was about AI. They had like AI, the American with Disabilities Act, like all these random things that are not like what's Americans are really, you know, worried about right now. Nothing of importance. So then I go to her X account thinking, okay, well, maybe this is more current. Every single post is nothing but campaign fundraisers. And then finally, I find one post on her vice president account, and this is what it said, quote, "Today at POTUS and I met with our national security team to discuss developments in the Middle East. Our commitment to the security of Israel is unwavering as we prepare to support the defense of Israel against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. We are also working to de-escalate regional tensions and prevent further conflict. We also discussed the steps we are taking to defend our forces and respond to any attack against our personnel in a matter and place of our choosing," end quote. So she basically says a lot of words, but really doesn't say anything. What are the steps that you're taking? What were those points that you talked about? We don't know. She didn't list it. So, Tara, like when you hear that message, does that give you any confidence whatsoever in her leading our country through this imminent threat?
Okay. While you're talking, here's what's going on in my head, right? And this is going to sound completely ridiculous, but all I can see is this image of like a South Park style cartoon of Kamala, like floating in the air in a yellow school bus. And you know how like the South Park characters, like they kind of like rock back and forth. And all I can see is her, like her head going back and forth while she's like laughing and maniacally waving. And there's like a war going on in the streets below. And she's just like cruising along in her magic school bus, laughing and like paying no mind to anything taking place. And it's like, there is zero part of me that can take this woman seriously. And like I said earlier, it's been what? 2 weeks into her campaign. We literally still have no idea what her platform is. There isn't anything definitive on her campaign website. All we know is that she's been flip-flopping on policy decisions that she ran on back in 2020. 4 years ago, she supports an endorsement banning fracking. Now she's apparently supporting fracking. She endorsed a mandatory federal buyback program for guns. Now she's wanting to ban assault weapons. She wanted to abolish private health insurance. Now she doesn't. Like, what the fuck is your actual platform? Nobody knows. But like I said on Monday, it doesn't matter because Democrats don't care. They just care that she's not Trump.
Yeah. Before she was running on the fact that she was the first Indian VP and now she's black. Like she flip-flops on everything, but that's the Democratic way. They don't do shit for 4 years. And then when elections roll around, all of a sudden they want to pretend like they're your savior. Then they're going to come in and fix everything.
Yeah.
But like after, I read that post, I was scrolling on TikTok and I see a clip from Fox News reporter Peter Doocy, who's always at the White House, and he catches Kamala leaving the Situation Room early before the meeting was even over. And like, he's like, oh, yep, nope, I can see right there. There's her car. She's leaving. And like the anchor like on TV was like, well, is the meeting over? He's like, nope, it's not over, but she's leaving. So it's like, what's going on? Was she just slacking off or was she kicked out? Like, she's supposed to be the next leader of our nation, but during the biggest crisis, she leaves the meeting early? Like, what is going on?
Maybe she went to pick up donuts, or maybe she had to go record another cringeworthy campaign video.
Yeah. I mean, either way, it's bad. It's like if she's slacking off, that's bad. Or were they like, get the fuck out of the room so the big people, like the adults in the room, can talk? Like either way, it's scary. It's not good. So there's all that going on. Okay. Then this video comes out. So remember Jamie Raskin, the congressman who was like a really big part of the January 6th committee?
Yeah.
Well, now he's suggesting that if Trump wins the election, that they should disqualify him. So I am going to play a clip. I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene was the one that originally posted that. I found this post from the Patriot Dad on TikTok. But this is straight from Jamie Raskin's mouth.
You need to hear it from his mouth, and then we can figure out what we should call it.
And the greatest example going on right now before our very eyes is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which they're just disappearing with a magic wand, as if it doesn't exist, even though it could not be clearer what it's stating. And so, they want to kick it to Congress. So it's going to be up to us on January 6, 2025 to tell the rampaging Trump mobs that he's disqualified. And then we need bodyguards for everybody in Civil War conditions, all because the 9 justices, not all of them, but these justices who have not many cases to look at every year, not that much work to do, a huge staff, great protection, simply do not want to do their job.
Did you catch that? That's Jamie Rath.
Okay, so here's what pisses me off. Again, like rules for thee, not me. Like he cried over and over about the January 6ers walking into the Capitol and people questioning the election. Yet he's flat out saying that if Trump does legitimately win, they should disqualify him and create civil war-like conditions. Tara, isn't that a fucking coup? Like, isn't that what he is publicly saying? We have a congressman that is talking about a coup and nothing's happening to him. Like, this is outrageous.
Yeah, because it's like all part of the plan. Like, we already know if Trump wins, this is a given, right? Like, we can take this back to 2016. Remember when he was elected and people were literally having mental breakdowns, and we had like schools and offices that were shut down, and like they were providing mental health counseling to crying students and employees because they were losing their shit and acting like either their parents or kids had just gotten murdered in front of them. And then these same lunatics were encouraged to riot for several months during the summer of 2020. And then, okay, it's been 4 years now, and Trump derangement syndrome has grown to such epic proportions that these people have become completely unhinged and they have no concept of reality. So, yeah, if Trump wins, like they're already conditioned to create these conditions, right? And I think we're going to see a level of violence that we haven't experienced in this country yet. And it's all due to conditioning of people saying shit like this over the last, okay, more than 4 years, 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we just look at what just happened in Bangladesh, now it's happening in Venezuela and in the UK with people that are fed up and they're protesting, they're taking to the streets. Like it just makes me feel like that is coming, this November. And so speaking of Jamie Raskin, he was just CC'd on a letter from James Comer, who is the chairman on the Committee for Oversight and Accountability, explaining how Kamala was like tasked with the border crisis. So they go into like detail about how like absolutely she was assigned. And then it goes into detail and like gives all the facts of how many people cross the border and just how bad the border crisis has gotten. And so part of the letter says, quote, the mass illegal migration under the Biden-Harris administration has contributed to murders, sexual assaults, and serious bodily injuries committed against numerous Americans at the hands of illegal aliens. The committee seeks to understand whether Vice President Harris has done anything to address the worst border crisis in American history, end quote. And at the end of the letter, it ends with requesting all documents and communications between U.S. Customs and Border Protection and the executive office of Vice President Kamala Harris so they can provide oversight as to what she has actually done, if anything, to fix the root causes. Now, I want to like place a bet here. Should we take bets on whether or not a single document is going to show up for this committee?
Okay, so the deadline for providing these documents is August 20th, right? So that's like less than 2 weeks. They're asking for records going back to January 20th of 2021. Okay, she went to the border once in 4 years. She's never met with or even spoken to either the current or the former Border Patrol chief. And I'm guessing it's not going to take 2 weeks for them to produce documents because they probably don't exist in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. She's going to have nothing. And this is what's so funny is I feel like the right always has receipts and documentation. And then the left, it's just like, talking about things that aren't real and they just throw out like emotions. And so this, I think it's great because it highlights that, okay, if you say that, you did such a great job, show us some proof, like any document will do because it doesn't exist. But speaking of illegal migrants, have you seen the receipt that's going around social media from this Venezuelan migrant that she like left behind at a grocery store?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll send you a screenshot of it. So apparently when you get food stamps or like funds from the government, it goes on to a debit card. And then when you purchase something, the receipt will show you your balance remaining on the debit card. So this receipt she leaves behind, someone gets a hold of it, and it said that she had a remaining balance of $13,000, 13,400 for groceries, just for groceries. And on top of that, $4,498 in cash. Okay, like this, it's so jarring. Like I have a family of 5, and I can tell you, we don't even need $1,000 a month for groceries. But yet this illegal migrant is getting $13,000. And so like on social media, there were people in the comments that were like, well, this could be a rollover. Like if the money went unused in previous months, it rolls over. Okay, well, why is it rolling over? If you're not using the money, then why does the government feel that they need to pay you? Obviously, you're not in need of it. And I'm sorry, but I've never gotten $13,000 from the government for food in my entire life. The whole thing is freaking outrageous.
Yeah, that's because the government doesn't need to buy your vote.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have actually seen this before or talked to people about it back when I was a cop. Like people that were literally going on vacations with these debit cards that were supposed to be, for food. I someone went to Hawaii on fucking vacation with a food stamp card. So
Wow.
does this like surprise me? Not necessarily, but it is outrageous. But you know what else is outrageous, Stephanie? And I'm bringing this up because you mentioned this earlier with Biden. And as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, we really haven't seen Biden. We haven't heard from Biden. He's technically still our president, right? And like, other than this supposed phone call with Netanyahu last Friday and the alleged meeting that he had with his national security advisors that we talked about on Monday, we haven't really seen him. And apparently that's a topic for KJP, right? So a reporter asked her that earlier today, and I want to play the clip of what she said just a couple hours ago.
For attack any moment from Iran. U.S. troops in Iraq were injured yesterday. Why have we not heard directly from President Biden this week? We know he met with his team yesterday. Yep. We know today's VP Harris's big day, but he's still the president. Where is he?
Well, here's the thing. You've seen the president. He has been very clear about making sure that we continue to try to de-escalate tensions. We just put out two readouts today, a readout yesterday, and our focus right now is to make sure that we continue to try to de-escalate tensions here, and that's what the president has been doing. He's been very focused on that, talking to our partners to make sure that we get that done. I was asked about, from that readout that we just put out, I was asked about the ceasefire deal and what the president, that last line that was pointed out to me. That is something that the president has been focused on, getting that done. I don't have anything beyond what we put out, but we're monitoring the situation closely. We want to make sure that we get to continue to have those de-escalation conversations. You had Secretary Blinken had a number of conversations with partners. The president, as I just said, speaking to King Abdullah, King of Jordan yesterday, and the leaders of Qatar and Egypt this morning. We put out a readout. And so that's what he's doing. That's what he's going to continue to focus on doing, is trying to make sure that we de-escalate tensions.
So we expect to see him this week, because I know you guys haven't been putting out the schedule. We've been getting it the night before. So
we are in a different time, as I've said many times before, and you will get to see the president. That I can say. Look, it is certainly the president's priority to make sure that we do everything that we can to protect our national security, right? To make sure that we do everything that we can to work with our partners. And de-escalating the tensions in the Middle East is certainly something that we want to make sure that we continue to do. I do want to mention, you mentioned Hezbollah attacks on Israel last night. I do want to add that while we do not believe the response has started yet, we remain concerned by the increase in violence, including the firing drones by Hezbollah into Israel. And we're going to continue to have those conversations to continue to try to de-escalate the situation that we're in.
Don't you think she sounds a little nervous?
She sounds nervous. She did her tell, which is he's been very clear. No, he hasn't been clear. We just said we haven't heard from him. I think she must be the person writing the posts on Kamala's social media, because it sounded like she said a lot without saying anything. Okay, you're de-escalating tensions. Number one, how? Number two, she says with our Middle East, whatever, partners. Okay, which ones? There's a lot of countries going to war right now. Which ones have you talked to? What have those threats been? Because we have Trump that would publicly, not only would he talk to the press every single day, but every fucking 5 minutes he would post on social media. So you knew exactly what he was thinking, what he was doing. I mean, and then here, neither one of them are talking. Kamala's cackling at her fundraiser event. And you know what else I was thinking is like, okay, clearly she wants to appeal to the radical left, right? They are very anti-Israel. So at the very least, she could have like given some speech about how she wants a ceasefire, like just at the very least, I'm saying, to appeal. But she won't even do that because she's not qualified. She doesn't stand for anything. She goes back and forth. She's afraid to just say what she really thinks. I mean, it's so blatantly bad, and it's really scary because we're not in a good place as a country, and we have no one in leadership right now.
No, but they're putting out readouts, Stephanie. Isn't that enough?
Well, guess what, KJP? I went on whitehouse.gov. Where are the readouts? Because all I see is some AI article that you posted. I mean, it's so ridiculous. You know, I came across Tulsi Gabbard. She did a podcast very recently, and she was talking about this very thing. And she was, you know, the guy was like, well, who is running our country? Like, clearly it's not Biden or Kamala. And she said it's the military industrial complex, which means Hillary Clinton, Obama, and Tony Blinken. And what did KJP said? She can't say anything that Biden did, but Tony Blinken is on it.
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, the military industrial complex that wants war because they all have their hands in the cookie jar and they make a lot of money when we're in a constant war.
Right, because look who has been going public and making comments over the last week, right? We hear Biden's made phone calls. We hear Blinken talking about how, you know, they're on top of things. You hear from Lloyd Austin. You hear from different White House offices. We don't hear from our own fucking president because he's in the fucking basement and he's not meeting with anybody.
And again, Kamala wants to be president. This is her opportunity to shine, to show her leadership under a stressful, like very serious condition, and she won't say a freaking word about it. And so I think that this makes it crystal clear that in November, you're either voting for Trump or you're voting for the military industrial complex. It's not Kamala or Waltz. They're puppets that the military industrial complex is controlling. So if you want more of that and constant war and constant conflict and open borders within our own country, then vote for that. Otherwise, we need Trump.
Yeah.
Oh God, I need to go get a drink, have some wine, like simmer down. I'm just like, it's so maddening. It's so maddening. So anyhow, we'll
if
just
I
leave
wasn't
it.
so tired, I would be more furious too, but I'm clearly having trouble even articulating myself at this point.
You know, and what's bad is this is only like a small slice of what's going on right now. Like
I
we have so
know.
many more topics that we're just going to save because
We can't
they're
even
not even
get to
related to
them.
this
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
So it's constant. Make sure you're following the podcast because then you get notified when new episodes come out. And seriously, for everyone listening, the best thing you can do is share this with other people because I mean, by doing that, you never know who you're going to help inform and, you know, get someone to kind of wake up and pay attention to the real risk of what's going to happen if they vote for Kamala. So share it as much as you can. Leave us a review. Again, we're really loving seeing these reviews coming through, and we'll see you back here on Friday. Thanks for tuning in.